Now it's Sparage taking the shot, scores!
What a move! What a goal! How about that?
It handles its way to the net, scores! Oh my goodness!
What's going on, everyone? Alex Bastyovanszky here with NOJHL Game Day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Obviously, we're trying something a little bit different today. Instead of a studio show, to help me set up the first round of the NOJHL playoffs. It's our playoff preview, the most wonderful time of the year. We are doing a podcast today, and I've got a panel of some of the most knowledgeable guys involved in the league who are going to help me out here today. And without further ado, let me introduce them from the Hearst Lumberjacks, the man, the legend, Dennis J. Puska. From Iroquois Falls, Mr. Richard Whitty, a guy who's got way too much time on his hands these days. We'll get into that in a moment. He's happily retired now. Thomas Mercier from the Sudbury Cubs and the Espanola Paper Kings as well. And we can't leave out Courtney Kenny from the Powassan Voodoos. Gentlemen, how's everyone doing? Are you excited or what? It is, as I said, the most wonderful time of the year, playoff hockey. Thomas, you and I have been talking about this for months. I know how pumped you are about the playoffs. How's everyone doing though? Yeah. First off, everyone good?
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, we're ready. It's the best time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Ready to rock and roll. Ready to roll, huh? So let's just start off with, guys, as we get into the first round of the playoffs. Look back for 1 second. Whoever wants to jump in here, just take it. What's looking back at the regular season here? What stuck out to you guys the most? And whoever wants to take it, go right ahead. Jump on in.
Yeah, I think probably quite an impressive crop of rookies across the league this year. I know, you've got Powassan with the Sioux Eagles. You've got Alex Bastyovanszky, the netminder, coming in and becoming the number one netminder with Hearst. And one of Courtney's favorites, Caden Wicklander with the Espanola Paper Kings. There's just a good crop of scoring forwards, defensemen, goaltenders right across the board. And that's a real boost, and it says something about the quality of development of players for the league and the reputation of the league improving year after year after year. So I think it's been just terrific that we've been able to do that.
And Jordan Mayo right there.
Jordan Mayo, Jordan Mayo, for sure.
Can't forget about your Iroquois Falls boy. I mean, come on.
Jordan started the year off with a bang, the very first game of the season with a hat trick, and he tailed off a bit, and it was just kind of a learning curve to be able to play the physicality of junior A hockey coming out of U18, and then near the end of the year, he really started to pick it up, and he was on fire coming down the stretch, as was the team. So they're a very, very young club, and hopefully we'll have Jordan back again next year to light it up, hopefully for the Storm.
Yeah, how about the rest of you guys? What are your thoughts on the regular season that was, Thomas or Courtney?
You know what? I know we've talked about this before, Alex, but the goaltending this year was absolutely outstanding in the NOJHL. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be biased and say, my guys in Powassan were pretty good. Tyson Wilcox and Austin Seibel, when a lot of people pegged goaltending in Powassan as a question mark going into the season. But, I mean, you look around the league, Bone, and I got to call Charche's first game in Powassan with Thomas, earlier this year when he came for the Sudbury Cubs. He's been outstanding. Jace Norrell, Boivin up in Hearst, and even the guys. You got to call probably the save of the year, which I think was Norrell, wasn't it? Yeah,
against you guys. Yeah, that was one of the highlights for sure. Poor Jack Nolan, but he made up for it with his own Michigan goal, I guess. So he did. Yes. Yeah, that's going gangbusters on Instagram, by the way. Since I threw that thing up, I think it's had about 13,000 views or something like that.
That's great. So great to hear.
Oh yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, especially for a kid like Jack, he's so nice too. So, but speaking of that game, Justin Sullivan, the goaltender, played really well for Iroquois Falls. And one thing I do want to point out, he didn't get the ending he wanted, but Connor Hatfield and Espanola, they allowed him to play the last 2 minutes of that game against Powassan as well on Sunday, and that was nice to see. So, just the goaltending in general across the league this year has been absolutely top tier, and I think that's really something that we haven't seen in recent years. So that's been a lot of fun to watch.
And Dryden Riley, who is he still 17 as well? with Timmins. I mean, just absolutely rock star this year. Team Canada East. Just great performance by Riley. So let's do this. I'm going to just, first of all, looking at the standings right now, just to show everyone where the teams finished up. Greater Sudbury, of course, which we will get to in just a moment. Ridiculous season. At one point, they had a 20-game winning streak, followed by Hearst. Dennis's Lumberjacks there with the 80 points. Then Blind River with 72. Timmins just edging out the Sioux Eagles in that 4-5 spot. So Timmins will have home ice advantage for the first round playoff series. The Thunderbirds, the Voodoos, Courtney, you guys struggled a little bit down the stretch there, which we'll talk about, obviously. And then, of course, we've got Richard's Iroquois Falls Storm. Fascinating joust with Espanola down the stretch to see who was going to get the 8th and final playoff spot. Let's start off then let's look at the matchups for each of the series. We got to start with the Cubs, the number 1 seed, taking on Richard's Iroquois Falls Storm, number 1 versus number 8. Cubs were 4-0 against the Storm this season. The Cubs finished 7th in the CJHL rankings, 8-2 to finish the season. I mean, it was just a great year all around for the defending champions who are going for back-to-back titles. 1 home loss all season as well. Thomas, we're going to start with Thomas on this one because the Cubs just had such a ridiculous season. So, give us about a minute and a half kind of thing. What are you expecting from this series? And also, I mean, just talk about how good the Cubs have actually been.
Yeah, the Cubs have just had an unbelievable season. I mean, the first time finishing with less than 10 regulation losses for the first time in well over 30 years. Like, it was that good of a season for them.
Yeah.
I think the Iroquois Falls Storm are going to be a good challenge for the Cubs. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of travel involved, so both teams will be very tired on the road games, but the Cubs have been dominant on home ice. They, like you said, they started their home schedule 0-1-1. Since then, have won 24 straight. They have the definition of home ice advantage, but don't mistake the Iroquois Falls Storm. They are a strong team with good offense, good offense, good defense, and solid goaltending. I think it'll be a really tough series for them. But again, this is a Cubs team that had a chance at the national title. They had their opportunity, and now they want the whole thing.
Prediction, Thomas.
I'm going to say Sudbury in 5. It could potentially go 6. I think Iroquois Falls may take one on home ice, but it's really tough to beat the Cubs in their own building.
Okay, so we got to go to Richard then, who, of course, calls those Storm. And Richard and I, of course, Thomas, you and I also, you guys helped me out with a story for NOJHL Game Day, where we were talking about down the stretch, what could possibly happen, because, Thomas, you call Espanola's games as well. Who was going to make it in between the two teams? And when I talked to Richard brought up a really good point where he said, the Storm have been playing playoff type hockey for the past few weeks. Like, they've been really dialed in because they dropped, what was the score? 9-4 over Espanola in the game that was basically the decider, for those teams. They dropped them at home. And I was talking to Richard about that. And I said, are you surprised? And Richard said, nope, wasn't surprised because Iroquois Falls has been playing that kind of hockey. So Richard, here we are. We're going into this series. Obviously, they're heavy underdogs, but they've been playing extremely well lately, 7-2, 0-1 over their last 10 games. What are you expecting from this series, and what's your prediction?
Yeah, a lot of people kind of discounted the Storm in this series, or will discount them. They're the 8th place team. They're the underdog, no doubt. But the 4 hottest teams in the league were 1, 2, 6, and 8. Sudbury, Hearst, the Sioux Thunderbirds, and the Iroquois Falls Storm in the last 10 games of the season. They've been playing some of their best hockey, running up 3 9-goal games in their last 7 games. And they've really started to find the offense. They've really started to find that their net drive is getting rewarded. They're really got their power play firing on all cylinders as of late. It was the worst power play in the league, and even with Elliott Lake having taken a knee just after Christmas, their power play was still well ranked below Elliott Lake's, and now they've started to pick it up. Do I think they can win this series? I always hope for them. Yeah, they're my team. I think the biggest thing is going to be the inexperience. They're a very, very young team. Sudbury's, battle tested, playoff tested. And if you look at Sudbury's lineup, they're loaded. They've got 5 players in the top 20 based on points per game with major junior experience. Yeah. And Iroquois Falls doesn't have that. That being said, though, Ken, the goaltending, I think the edge goes to Iroquois Falls, and I think Justin Sullivan and Maverick Fletcher, depending who they go with, is the number one. I think they can steal some games in that series, and I see it 5-6 games as Thomas does. But it is a learning and growing experience for the young Storm team, that learning how to win, learning how to get to the playoffs, learning how to sustain that energy, over the course of a season, and I think it's going to help them grow as a hockey team and as hockey players. So, but I don't see them coming out on top in this series. Hey, I've been wrong before in a lot of things, though.
To piggyback on Rick real quick, the goaltending, I think, has been the biggest question mark for Sudbury since the Centennial Cup last year. I mean, that was the biggest problem for them. I think it's fair to say, going up against teams from the OJHL, AJHL, and all these other places, and they've had a carousel of goaltenders. I think Bull and Churchill are probably their best options. But yeah, Maverick Fletcher and Justin Sullivan have been fantastic. So I got to agree with Rick. They might have the advantage of goaltending, but up against Sudbury's potent offense, it'll be an interesting series for sure.
Courtney, how about you? What's your take on this?
Well, I hate to give love to the Sudbury Cubs just because of Thomas, but
every time I interview you and I ask you about a Sudbury Cub, you always tell me the same thing. So
that's my default answer at this point. We're still a little bit sore in Powassan after the finals last year, but it is what it is. Sudbury has put together an excellent team. You can't deny that for sure. I mean, Lucas Signoretti alone has been running away with a lot of things in this league, historic, some might say, on a few things. So especially in my time around the league, I don't think we've seen a player this electrifying. And he was a big reason why Espinola last year in the playoffs could have done some damage. That's the thing with Signoretti. He's now playing with a team that's expected to go far. How's that going to work out for them? How's that going to work out for the team? Iroquois Falls, I saw up close and personal, last weekend, how good they are when they're playing for something that's on the line. They absolutely ran through the Powassan Voodoos, who themselves have been struggling, but that's not to discount Iroquois Falls. They've been absolutely outstanding in that game, that 9-4 victory against Powassan last Friday night, and then to go into Iroquois Falls or French River the next night and do it again to punch their ticket. This is a team that's gonna surprise some folks, especially up front. I think Jordan Mayo is going to become a household name maybe in this league just from this playoff run.
I think he is already, my friend.
Well, that's it.
Second in rookie scoring and first on Iroquois Falls as a rookie is darn good. Yeah.
He's one of the worst kept secrets. That probably is because of where Iroquois Falls is in the standings. So if people don't know him now, they're going to know him by the end of this, I think. I do agree that I think Sudbury's going to come out for this because they've been built for this time of year ever since last year. But I think Iroquois Falls makes a series out of this, and I think in my heart of hearts it goes 6. It could very well go 5. I don't think it's going to be a sweep for Sudbury though.
Okay, now let's move to Dennis. What are your thoughts on this series?
Well, I really like this series. I agree with the guys. I think it'll go 5 or 6. The Sudbury should move on. However, Iroquois Falls has been fun to watch down the stretch, and one of the biggest acquisitions was Jaden Lyons. I think he has really been a nice addition to the club when they made the move from the Timmins Rock. I think picking him up has helped them offensively. Also, another thing to note about Iroquois Falls, their season, I think, really started to cook in the second half when they thought they had a hint at the playoffs. Was that overtime win in Timmins against the Rock on that, was it a Sunday afternoon? I think it was. What a phenomenal game that was, that Iroquois Falls came back and won that in overtime. And I think you can see the confidence start to ooze on this team, and they've done such a great job. And hopefully the fans get out and support the game in Iroquois Falls at Just Jordan Arena. And I think you're going to have a fun series to start. The key for Sudbury is they can't look past Iroquois Falls. They have to keep their focus on what's in front of them, and you cannot look past anybody. I've seen it before. I've covered junior hockey now for 17 years, and if you look past one team in junior hockey, it's going to be tough. So we'll see what happens going forward. But like I said, Sudbury moves on, but Iroquois Falls is going to prove that they can be in there, and I think they're going to give it a fun ride, and Rich is going to have some fun games to call up there.
How many games? How many games, Dennis? What do you think? And how many games, Dennis?
You know what? I'm going to say Sudbury in 6. That's my bottom line in all this. Sudbury in 6 right now.
Okay, so from my
Change my pick
perspective,
next week?
absolutely.
Just one quick side note.
Fluid,
Note on the 4 games this year. Sudbury won one on home ice. I think it was 6-2. Every other game in that between the two teams was a 1-goal game.
He's right.
Yep. Good point. I think the only other team that played them any better was Hearst, but we'll get to that in a second when we talk about the Lumberjacks. But so for me, it is going to be Sudbury, but I got so much admiration for this Iroquois Falls team and how they played this season. You talked about how young they are, Richard. Good experience for the future. Sudbury's just they're really, really powerful, and it's that major junior experience as well. It's the veterans. Once you get into playoff time, you need those veterans. You guys got these guys coming back with major junior experience, and man, they're a physical team. And you got Dax Klinkhammer and you got Antonioni throwing these bombs out there, keeping guys on edge. Not that Iroquois Falls can't toss them as well, but they're just a really good team. I am taking Sudbury, but it's in 6. I got a feeling Iroquois Falls is going to take a couple. So that's my prediction. Let's move to Dennis's team, Hearst Lumberjacks, number 2, taking on Courtney's team, the Powassan Voodoos. Now, the Jacks did win all 4 games. 2 were in overtime. And when I say these things, folks, I'm doing this through me going through the website and trying to look for each game kind of thing. So you guys are going to call me out on it if I'm wrong. But Jacks won all 4. 2, but I believe, Dennis, were in overtime.
And one was that amazing comeback effort when they were up, 4-0 or 5-0 in Hearst. I missed that game. I actually wasn't there that game. And then I watched the scoreboard, just went, oh my God.
You don't.
What happened down
You can
the
stop
stretch.
anytime now. You can stop anytime.
Courtney, are you getting a familiarity between us and you again? What is this, 4th time in the last 5 years, my friend? I think Mr. Dawson ably gave us the info.
That's the nice thing about Chris Dawson, having him in your back pocket, is he's an encyclopedia when it comes to the NOJHL.
Mm-hmm.
But I've made this joke a few times since it was said. I said, there's 3 things in life that are guaranteed, and that's death, taxes, and Powassan and Hearst playing in the first round. So even with a different format, it happens. So
they still end up together. Yeah, it's
great.
But I mean, guys, Hearst had five guys in the top 10 of league scoring, which is absolutely phenomenal, led by Mathieu Como. By the way, is that the proper pronunciation,
Yes.
Dennis? I've been saying Mathieu Como because, I've got my 9 years of French immersion. I try to show it off from time to time. It's been a long time, though, since I've had to speak much French. This is the most French I've spoken this year because of all the French players in this league. So I'm a little rusty, but Como, anyway, fantastic season with 67 points. And it has to be mentioned, like I said before, the Lumberjacks were the most successful team against the Sudbury Cubs this season. They were 3-1 against the Cubs. No one else was anything close to that. So very impressive. So let's start with Dennis here. Dennis, the Voodoos sort of they faded a bit down the stretch. Man, I think it's the jinx that I did, because as soon as I did a feature story on Powassan and I titled it Flying High for game day, they go out and they go on an 8-game slide like right after that. So I don't think Peter Goulet will ever talk to me again after that. But
I've been told that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And listen, I know Peter from his OJHL days. I get along great with Peter, but I'm kind of scared to call him now after what we've done. But Dennis, give us your thoughts on this series and your prediction.
Well, this series really, you can't, again, it's one of those series you don't look past, and don't look at the results, don't look at the regular season. All you have to remember is look at the past history of these two teams in the playoffs. And last year, we had more overtimes than I've seen weekends. That was unreal last year with the overtime games. I think Courtney had almost all of them in Powassan, and there were some lengthy ones. 3 overtimes. That must have been going to work the next day. Really kind of interesting for you. But if you have Hearst has got depth, and that's one thing I like about this group. Ani Willette. You've got Alain Como, you got Tyler Patterson, you've got guys like that, Aiden Kalen, but the defense has gotten better. They picked up Hinman out of Iroquois Falls. I like him. He moves the puck well. They've also grabbed Will Paquette, who's healthy now. They've got some other young guys. You got the Garvin kid, who's been very good for them. on the back end. They picked him up at the trade deadline. Their defense has gotten better. The key for Hearst, limit the offensive zone turnovers and the turnovers inside their own end, and also special teams. Special teams, I think, will be a very key part. And Alexandre Boivin, what a great story in net. Former Kapuskasing Flyer, almost got his team to the Great North U18 Championship, or when it was called the Great North Midget Hockey League Championship. A couple of years ago, almost got him to the final. The kid's dynamite. And with Owen Bontuas as his backup, I really like Hearst. I really think they've got it. However, I like Austin Seibel. I really like watching him play in net when he gets on a roll. And Powassan finds goaltending in the playoffs, and they find a way to kind of get things going. I really like Caden Cowell, and I really also like Justin Russo. They're fun guys to watch as well. Hearst, I'm going to say Hearst in 5, but I think it could go 6 games. You just never know. As we say, anything's possible with Powassan and Hearst. Right, Courtney?
Yeah,
Courtney, what's your take?
So to kind of go back on last year's series, like you were mentioning, Dennis, this is how close it was. It was 5 games. It went to overtime in Powassan, the 2 games that they were here. It can be symbolized by the Game 3 overtime winner where Cameron Lebke scored, but he banked it off the goalie. He was going to miss the net if the goalie wasn't there. So that's how close that series was. It also killed my voice for the rest of the playoffs, those 2 back-to-back overtime games. So that was awesome. But that being said, the Voodoos have really struggled in the last month and a half. Like, there's no question. I sent you that stat. That was their first, 7-game losing streak or whatever it was since their inaugural season.
It was a mind-blowing stat, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And if you look at the schedule, it doesn't look like it because they put in the forfeit for Elliott Lake that would have been there. But that, it's still
that
a losing
tripped me
streak.
That tripped me up a few times this year on everyone when I was talking about winning streaks and losing streaks, and I'm like, oh, we're factoring Elliott Lake games in there, the forfeits, right? So but
which I just want to say again, that situation's really unfortunate, but so with the Voodoos, they've really struggled. I think the confidence has taken a bit of a kick. That being said, Peter Goulet's a vet. He knows what he's doing with this team. He knows how to get the most out of them at the right amount of time. I mean, last year, the Voodoos were the underdogs in all 3 series that they played. They won 2 of them. I don't think anyone had them beating Timmins in the second round, and they did it in 7 games. So, I mean, this is a team that has holdovers from last year. They're a young team, but that's the question. You talk about Austin Seibel or Tyson Wilcox. We're not sure who's really going to start as of right now. And the question is which one of them shows up at the playoffs. Is it, Tyson Wilcox making 50 saves against the Sioux Eagles, Tyson Wilcox, or is it Tyson Wilcox over the last month? Is it Austin Seibel, who was dynamite in the first half of the season? Is it Austin Seibel the last, little bit? That's not to take away from those kids. They're absolutely dynamite people. Also, can Caden Cowell get on a roll like he was before he got hurt? That's another thing. He was one of the top scoring players in the league at that point. Justin Russo is one of the best defensive forwards, I would say, in the league. Can he shut down Hearst? Hearst has a lot of firepower. Historically, the Voodoos have been the underdogs against Hearst the last couple of times that have won. I got to go with the Lumberjacks, though, this series. And out of respect for Peter and out of respect for the Voodoos, I think it's going 6.
Okay. Thomas, how about yourself?
Well, see, the Powassan Voodoos, this is the team that I followed a lot during the playoffs this year, obviously going to the final. And there's a reason they got to the final last year. They were a team that took down 2 of the toughest teams in the NOJHL. Like that's a really tough task to do. And yeah, they came up short in 5 games last year. And yes, they're on a slump right now. But Peter Goulet, he represented Canada at international events in the past for a reason. He's one of the most respected coaches in the NOJHL and all of junior hockey. That being said, the Hearst Lumberjacks guys are probably the most fun team I've watched. And yes, I know Sudbury was as dominant as they were, but watching the Lumberjacks every time I'm either in Espanola or Sudbury, they're so much fun. And a couple of names that Dennis didn't mention. One of my favorite players that's been flying under the radar is Bronson Babiak. He is so much fun to watch. He is so fast with the puck. He makes amazing plays and he's not afraid to get physical either. But yeah, he brought up Alexandre Boivin. What a story for him. I think as a rookie goaltender, for him to put up those kind of numbers on a team like the Hearst Lumberjacks is beyond impressive. And I think he will make or break this series. I don't think this is a sweep. I don't think any series is going to be a sweep. In my honest opinion, I do think Hearst takes this in 5. Powassan might be able to get a win at home, but like Courtney and Dennis said, they have been slumping heading into the playoff push. But obviously, again, they already had 7th locked up, so I don't think the games down the stretch really mattered to them. It was just about discipline. And I talked to Peter Goulet. He knows this team is struggling. He's trying to turn it around. But so many players have come through the organization this year. And the biggest question has been the goaltending. I have full confidence in Austin Seibel because he has been pretty good since arriving from the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. But him going up against Boivin, I have to give the edge to Hearst.
Okay, and you said, 5 games, you think?
Yeah, 5 games for Hearst.
Well, let's take this to Mr. Whitty then, because that's an interesting comment. Because when we did that story a couple of weeks ago, Richard, about whether it was going to be Espanola or Iroquois Falls, and you said, well, hold on for a second here. An interesting point is that the Powassan Voodoos better get their you-know-what together, because if they're not careful, they're going to be they could be caught by both these teams. And when you look at the final standings, if Espanola didn't do I keep using the you-know-what term in the bed, but finish with, they finished with 46 points, only 3 points behind Powassan. Powassan had to pull out a win over the last in the last week there to really secure that spot. It was that close. So it's interesting that anyway, Richard brought that up though a couple of weeks ago. He had the foresight to see that there could be problems coming. But Richard, you give us your thought on that series, and if you think that Powassan might pull an upset this time.
Well, the one thing I'm going to say first off is Dennis and I maybe were a little too familiar with the Hearst Lumberjacks. He referred to Matthew Como as Alain Como, his dad. And
Matthew Como.
And I've done the same thing in the past when I referred to Adam Schillinglaw as his father, Derek, who's a friend of mine. So I talked to his mom and dad about that, and they got a chuckle about it when it was on game day. So you know what? I
called him TJ. I think I called him TJ once this year, and that's was he a football player, TJ Schilling? I can't remember, but we've all had our little stumbles. Sorry, go on, Richard.
But you know what? Powassan is kind of limping towards the playoffs here. Austin Seibel, if I'm coaching that team, he's going to be my starting goaltender. He threw up a beauty of a game against Sudbury last week, the 3-2 game. And, I just think he is the goalie that'll take you and give you the best chance to get a win against a very, very strong Hearst team. One thing that intrigues me about Hearst is they remind me a lot of the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies when they went on a Memorial Cup run in 2019. They had one defenseman that would kill penalties, play the power play, play a regular shift, and that player is Adam Schillinglaw. That guy's going to have to play 30 minutes a game, night in, night out, night in, night out. Rouyn had Noah Dobson back in the day, and he was playing 30, 35 minutes a night. If something were to happen to Adam Schillinglaw, and if something were to happen if the rookie goaltender, Boivin, which I don't think will happen, he's got a lot of support systems. His brother Patrick was the goaltender for the Timmins Rock, and they're pretty tight. And I know their mom and dad too. And Patrick will be talking to Alex probably the entire time. But if those two things, something were to happen with those two things, I think Hearst could be in some trouble defensively. Offensively, no question, they're a strong team. Do I think Powassan has enough to take them out? No, I don't. Do I think this could be probably the shortest series of the first round? Yeah, and I'm going to say 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah.
I do want to add, just before we move off this series, there's a couple of other factors. Like we talk about ifs, and if for candy, and all that stuff. 2 players that are kind of on my X factor list real quick, that if they show up to play like they have at spurts in the season, that's Caleb Dawson and Caden Dubroy. Those guys can help extend this series for sure. And I mean, if the Voodoos will need secondary scoring, those could be the guys that you're looking to, and those are X factors for me in this series, I think.
Caden Dubroy has played against Boivin in the past in the GN U18 league. That could be a potential positive for the Powassan Voodoos moving into that series.
Courtney, you're going to have to bribe Dawson with the Timbit again.
Every game, I give him one.
Call. You finally got your goal.
You know what he says to me at the game against Iroquois Falls? I give him the Timbit, and he says, well, I got to get you one because I gave Thomas one yesterday. I said, why would you do that to me? Why would you give Thomas a goal call?
It's good stuff. No, I'm glad you finally got your goal call, guys. I'm gonna. I love Goulet, and I really do like the team. But in this one I've got to go in 5 games. I believe it's going to be as well. Hearst. It's Hearst and Sudbury to me who are the 2 deepest teams in the league. Hearst is the only team that I really feel rivals Sudbury's depth. We'll get to Blind River in a second, but it's very top heavy. Obviously, we know what we're talking about there. As much as I love Blind River, Hearst is just such a deep team. So for me, we'll move on here, but I think it's going to be Hearst in 5 games. So as I mentioned, Blind River, 3rd seeded Blind River taking on the Sioux Thunderbirds. The Beavers, they played 6 times. Beavers won 4 games. Sioux won 2. One of them was in overtime. Blind River has just looked really good over the last month and a half of the season. 6-3-1 over their last 10. We know who drives this team. Owen King, 50 goals in 49 games. 2nd in NOJHL scoring. Let's just start going around here with predictions on this one. Maybe we'll start with Dennis this time. What are your thoughts on this series against the Thunderbirds, who, to be honest with you, are playing their best hockey of the season over the past bit, 7-3 over their last 10. I interviewed Cole Jarrett last week for a story on the T-Birds. He's really happy with how they're coming into the playoffs right now, because they started off really well and then they had a lull in the middle of the season, and they've really picked it up at just the right time, which was sort of the key to my story. Is they're entering the playoffs at just the right time if you're the Sioux Thunderbirds. So, Dennis, what's your take on this series and your prediction?
Well, you know what? I think this is going to be a really close series. I think it could go 6. It might even go 7. Here's the difference. Noah Metivier. If Noah Metivier stands on his head like we've seen him in the past, Sault Ste. Marie might be right there for a series win. I love Sona Decker. He's fun to watch. James Legler's a good player for them. Owen King, he has to create and get help offensively. He can't do the series alone. The goaltending of Blind River concerns me. Can Bronx Bodner, Connor Durham Fox, are they strong enough to compete? Hard to say. I'm going to go, I don't know. Somebody got a coin they can flip real fast here?
It's that tight, yeah.
Right now, here's my thought. Sault Ste. Marie, Blind River, going to be a great series. How about Blind River in 7?
In 7 games, okay. Courtney, what do you think, Courtney?
Well, I really like Owen King. I know I sent you an email about that about a week or so ago when we were talking about the MVP.
I asked you that question, yeah.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And I do like Owen King. And if we're talking about the definition of like who means more for their team, Owen King, I mean, he drives Blind River, right? Like, no disrespect to Lucas Signoretti, but the cast that he has around him to Owen King, it's very different. That being said, playoff Sioux Thunderbirds are a beast. They always are. They're going to be tough to get out, and so is playoff Blind River. To be honest with you, they always seem to go on a bit of a run. I got to be honest. And one player I do really like to watch on this Thunderbirds. He was supposed to be in the OHL this year, but unfortunately couldn't play due to injury, and then he just made his debut late. That's Declan Gallivan. He would have been a big piece of the North Bay Battalion back end this season. They think very highly of him just from my time around the team. I think he could be an X factor for the Sioux Thunderbirds. I got to go with the favorite though, just because Owen King. I mean, he's a big player, and if he shows up to play the way he has in the regular season, I got to give Blind River 6 in 6. Okay. Sorry,
Thomas.
Yeah, just to kind of second or third, I guess, what Courtney and Dennis have said. Owen King, heavy is the head that wears the crown, obviously. The only player to reach 50 goals this season.
Yeah.
I think he's probably league MVP at the time that we're talking about this. Like you guys hit the nail on the head. You look at Lucas Signoretti's cast being able to, everyone's been able to chip in. It's not just the Lucas Signoretti show. Everyone's been able to chip in. On Blind River, much different story. Like everyone else around him has under 20 goals on the season. I think it was something like that.
I'll tell you real quick. It's King 75 points, and Wyatt Gibson was second on the team with 37 points.
See, I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem for Blind River. And no disrespect to Kyle Brick. I've known him for a long time. One of my best friends in this league. He has an amazing program. Don't get me wrong. They have a really, really strong team. But like you guys said, the Sioux Thunderbirds, when it comes to playoff hockey, is a different breed of hockey. Much like the Iroquois Falls earlier this season, they made a head coaching change and they felt it was necessary. And look at them now. They battle back from the dead and they are in the playoffs, much like the Storm are. And, Dennis brought up the name, Noah Mativier. I've been blessed to know Noah for the 4 years or so that he has been in this NOJHL, and especially his 2 years in Sudbury. There's a reason he is a 2-time playoff MVP, and he is going to be the difference maker, I think, in this series. Him versus Connor Dunham-Fox. Sign me up every day of the week for those kind of matchups. I am going to pull off the upset here, but I will say it will go to 7 games for the Sioux Thunderbirds.
Okay, and Richard, Mr. Whitty, what do you think?
I think Courtney and Thomas stole some of my answers from last night. I'm a big Declan Gallivan fan. He is probably one of the most underrated defensemen in the league, and I fully expected to see him in a North Bay Battalion uniform this year, and getting him back late in the year is a real boost to them. And again, I'll go back to what I said off the top of the show. The top 4 teams down the stretch, 1, 2, 6, and 8, Sudbury, Hearst, the Sioux Thunderbirds, and Iroquois Falls. And it's no question that Cole Jarrett's a terrific coach. Kyle Brick is a terrific coach. The one thing with the Sioux is I think they've got a more balanced attack. And I think if you can shut down Owen King, which I think Cole Jarrett can devise a game plan to do that, I think the Sioux is going to upset. If there's going to be an upset in the first round, this is it. And I think the Sioux in 6 or 7 will be the result of this series. I hate to say that because Kyle's a friend of mine, but I think that the Sioux is always playoff ready, and I think they're going to pull the upset.
Okay.
One thing I want to mention real quick, Alex, is one thing I want to mention real quick. I think someone that needs to figure it out going into the playoffs for the Sioux is Jacob Smith. He had a really quiet season, which surprised a lot of people.
Well, coming off what he did last year,
Yeah, he finished with less than half of his points that he put up last season, and a lot of people thought he was going to be one of the biggest pieces for the Sioux Thunderbirds moving into the playoffs or into the season this year. I think he's one of those players that will probably have to pick up the pace, and that's not to disrespect his game, but the Thunderbirds are going to need Jacob Smith to contribute for sure.
So my take on this is that it's almost flip a coin stuff. Sioux doesn't have a game breaker like Owen King, but the problem for me is that huge gap between King and everyone else from an offensive production standpoint. Now, the Sioux doesn't have any massive game breakers when it comes to points on the team. Like Sonnedecker and Legler shared the scoring lead with 42 points, right? But you've got a lot of guys right in that sort of 42 to 30 zone, and they came on really, really strong. Blind River did too, though, and they do have the game breaker in King. So, and we will all get to that question. A couple of you've mentioned it about the MVP thing. We'll leave that for the very end before we get off here. But to me, if they can shut down King, and that's what you got to do, right? I mean, that is the goal if you are the Sioux is and you're like, okay, shut down King, but no one's done it so far, right? No one's done it so far. It's easier said than done. That being said, this is the Sioux Thunderbirds in the playoffs, as you've all alluded to, and it's a different animal altogether. I kind of get that feeling like the Thunderbirds are built a little bit more for the playoffs, but I am going to say Thunderbirds in 7, and Storm Jensen, if you're watching this from Blind River, she's going to kill me for saying that.
Me too, probably.
Yeah, she is, and she's been great all season. She shoots some great video, and she's helped me out with a lot of stuff. I think I'm picking the T-Birds in 7, but you know what? It's honestly flip a coin for me. That's how close this is going to be, and this will be a really entertaining series too. So, and then finally, guys, we're just going to finish off with what should be. This might be the best series of the opening round, to be completely honest with you. Is Timmins taking on the Eagles? The Eagles didn't finish as hot as they would have liked to after a really, really hot mid portion to the season, where they had a 10-game winning streak at one point. Timmins is finishing the season on a real high note, like the Thunderbirds. This is how they wanted to finish their season. You know, when I was talking to them earlier in the season, they were like, "No, we're not playing the game." It was Ted I was talking to earlier in the season. How you feeling? He's like, "No, this is not. We're not even scratching our potential here about what we should be doing." Well, they definitely got their butts in gear towards the end of the season, and they're looking really good going into the playoffs. So 4 versus 5, very little separated these guys. We're going to start and go clockwise here. This time, let's start with Richard. Richard, what's your take on this?
I like Timmins' squad. I really like Dryden Riley. They tried to go with him as the starter in the playoffs last year, but as a 16-year-old, he went in there and he faltered a bit. And then Patrick Boivin came in, and the veteran took over the rest of the way. And they did okay in the playoffs with that. Then up front, getting Romanuk back from the Gatineau of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League gives them a big boost to their attack once again. Caden MacArthur is an ultimate power forward. He's in there mucking it up, and he can score. They've got a lot of speed throughout the lineup on the forward line, and I just think Timmins is going to have too much for the Sioux. The more I saw the Sioux and watched their games, they've got, 2 forward lines that are just dynamic. They've got solid goaltending. I think their weakness might be a little bit on the back end, and I think Timmins can exploit that with their forward speed, and I think this is a Timmins rock. Brandon Perry is just a terrific coach too, and he'll get the most out of all his players across the lineup. I think Timmins in 6 in this one.
I was just going to say that Eagles team, that's 3 guys in the top 10 of league scoring in Fredericks, Caulfield, and Povo. But I mean, they're all on one line too, aren't they? I mean, talk about firepower, but then it's you drop off a little. I mean, you've got Pouliot as well, who's really good, but I had the feeling about Sioux, they kind of might have peaked a little bit too early in the season when they were on that win streak. But anyway, I'll do my take at the end. I got to shut up here and let Thomas have his say. So Thomas, what do you think?
Well, Richard got his revenge on me. He stole my thunder. The Timmins Rock are so scary. But keep in mind, guys, at the start of the year, a lot of people had the Timmins Rock being the number 1 team in the league going into the season. And then they fell to the bottom of the standings very quickly. And they had a hard time stringing wins together. And there were a lot of moving pieces this year, too. And like Richard said, Brett Romanuk, as soon as he left, things did not go well for Timmins. But then as soon as he came back and Dryden Riley came back from the U17s in Alberta this year, boy, things turned around for the better for the Timmins Rock this year. I mean, we forget to mention some really great players. Reese Liu was in contention for Rookie of the Year this year. Jack Kelly, Courtney Kenny's very familiar with him. What a stupendous season Jack Kelly has had. Armitage, Kai Clayton, the list goes on and on for this team. And the goaltending has been fantastic. I mean, what more can you say about Dryden Riley? When it comes to the Sioux Eagles,
is a competent backup too.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, Graham Gee is a great backup. He's a great backup. I wish he would tone it down with the yellow pads a little bit.
Oh, the highlighter pads.
They're certainly a look, but yeah, strong goaltending for the Timmins Rock. When it comes to the Sioux Eagles, though, Jason Orrell some nights looks like one of the best goalies in the NOJHL. Rocking those silver pads, I got to say, heck of a look for the Southpaw. But then some nights, for instance, the game in Espanola where they lost 7-6. Yeah, the Sioux Eagles didn't look all that great. Mind you, it was their last game of the season. They were playing for home ice, and Timmins had the advantage going in, I think. Not to discredit the Sioux Eagles, because, I mean, Jeremy Rebick has put together one heck of a team down in Sioux, Michigan this year. But I think, like you guys said, the defense, I think, is the biggest weakness for the Sioux Eagles. Cole Reggett's probably their best outstanding defenseman, in my honest opinion. The Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario native was fantastic for the majority of the season from the games I've seen him play. But you have to give the edge to Timmins. I do think this series does go 7, though. I think all eyes are on this series. I think the Rock do take it in 7, though.
Okay, Courtney, how about you?
Thomas, when you were talking about the Rock falling in the standings, I guess you could say they sunk like a rock.
I knew that was coming.
I'm leaving the call.
That's fair. Well, you know how I feel about Jace Norrell, Alex. So it was quite the save of the year, I think, in that game against
I think that's the
Powassan.
save of the year. Yeah.
I'm very, very high on the Sioux Eagles team. I think they're my favorite to be the upset of the first round. That's no discredit to Timmins. I mean, Jack Kelly, like you mentioned, Thomas, he's a guy that would look real good still in Powassan green, I think. But you know, he's done a great job since he's come back to the league. Brant Romanuk, I'm very high on Brant Romanuk as well. He's fun to watch. You know, all those guys, MacArthur, up in Timmins. And that was probably last season getting to watch a lot of these guys in that Powassan Timmins series. I would argue that was the most exciting series in the league last year. Really familiarized myself with a lot of those guys, and maybe that's why I'm kind of not as high on them, because I've seen them, a lot of these guys, so much that whenever the Sioux came to town, those were a few of my favorite games this year. Both times that the Eagles came to Powassan, I loved calling those games. I think both of them went to overtime. If not, the first one did for sure. And those are the ones that I like. You know, we touched on Fredericks, you know, Provorozniak, Caulfield. I know we're not really touching on many guys out of that, because those are the guys. Those are the guys on the Sioux Eagles that drive.
Pouliot put out some good numbers too.
Yes.
For a while. He had a pretty good streak, but yeah, no, it's those three, yeah, for sure.
Those guys drive the bus, and how they go is how the Sioux Eagles are going to go if they get, you know, good goaltending from Jace Norrell, for sure, on the back end. So I'm going to say Sioux Eagles at 7, with the caveat that I'm not shocked if Timmins wins in 6.
Interesting. Okay, and Dennis, what do you think?
Well, here's something interesting. They're going to play a different playoff series format than everybody else. They're going to a 2-3-2 style, which I think is something the NOJHL needs to seriously adopt to cut down travel costs, and with the high price of fuel and everything. I know they say, well, that's a little bit of an unfair advantage. It's not an unfair advantage. They do it in other leagues, including the NBA. I'd like to see them go to a 2-3-2 format eventually. And that's what they're going to do in this series, just for travel. Timmins, I interviewed Brant Romanuk for my podcast earlier this year. Love the kid, such a neat kid. Watched Timmins last Friday. They were a little tired, a little out of it, but that Brandon Perry's going to have them ready to go. Guys mentioned MacArthur and Kelly. Boy, they're nice kids to watch. This Timmins teams, I think, has got more under the hood than, and they're ready to go. Concerns me a little bit. Can they get production from their defense? We'll see what happens there. Dryden Riley, such a phenomenal goalie, and that big, strong kid does a great job at making that first save, and really making that first save look easy. I'm going to go a little bit different here. You've all have kind of said this is going to be a long series. How about this? I think Timmins Rock will win it, just because I have a lot of ties to Timmins. I got a lot of family there. Timmins in 5.
Ooh.
Oh,
Wow.
Just for your series format, with the carbon tax coming off, the price of fuel is going to go down. So, we can go 2-1.
I do want to say, by the way, whoever wins this series, guys, the winner is going to be tired going into the next round. This is the longest travel by kilometer in any of the 4 series. That team, whoever wins the series, especially if it goes to 7, they're going to be tired for whoever they face in the next round, because, hey, they might play the Greater Sudbury Cubs in the second round. That's going to be a tough series for whoever comes on the winning end.
No question
You're
about
16 to 20 years old. I don't think tired is an excuse at this age level.
One other thing I do want to say, though, for the returners in Timmins, a lot of those guys are going to want to show good in the playoffs after watching their seasons end with 25 seconds left in Game 7 last year. That, to me, that would have sent me into the summer really angry. Mm-hmm. This is the time to, put that away and move past that now. So Timmins is going to be, they're going to be extra motivated, I think, the Timmins Rock. So their season came down to those 25 seconds, and a lot of those guys are on the team this year.
Right. Well, okay, for me, it's just two teams going in opposite directions. So not that the Sioux's been nosediving, they just have sort of leveled off compared to where they were before. Whereas I feel that Timmins has really gotten it going. It was that stretch of games where they had, I think, were they on a 7 or an 8 game win streak at some point over the past couple of months, and they had that stretch where they beat Hearst and they beat Sudbury. And there was one other big, was it the Thunderbirds? They also dropped, who was heating up at that point as well. But they had a really good stretch, and that's when it was a gap. They're really starting to show what they were supposed to be doing in the first place. I do really like the makeup of that Sioux team as well. I just, riding the hot hands, and I think that Timmins has got a bit more depth. So for me in this one, I'm taking Timmins in 6. So in six games for me, I'm not as brave as Dennis to say 5 games on that. I also don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be 6 games. But it should be, that might be the best series of the opening round, guys. So it is going to be fun. Like we say, it's the most wonderful time of the year, playoff hockey. It's the second season. It's where everything changes. And one quick question. Thomas I know Courtney answered it about the King thing. Thomas, I feel like you answered it as well. Richard had a really good point. This is our last thing, guys, and then we got to get off here. But I asked Richard that question before I did my story where I was like, am I crazy thinking that Owen King should be serious consideration for MVP? And Richard came back with great season, but Richard said this early in the season too. He thinks that it's Schillinglaw. If not Signoretti, then Schillinglaw should get it, because if you take Schillinglaw, like you said earlier, Richard, off of the Lumberjacks, they're just not the same team. So the only guy that I haven't heard from on this is Dennis, because I'd like to know, Dennis, where do you come in on all this? Like, we suggested King because of how he carried Blind River. Listen, and I want to say, we're not knocking Lucas Signoretti by any way, shape, or form. None of us are. I know I'm not. I mean, he's been unbelievable. He was a great interview for the story I did. But I think it's a good question. Dennis, is Lucas the guy for you? Or if not, who do you have in mind as an MVP?
Well, you mentioned the 3 nominees right there. I think you got Lucas Signoretti. I think you got Owen King. I think you got Adam Schillinglaw. I think those are your 3. Take each of those players off those teams. What do you get? You've got some pretty lean, especially over in Blind River. You get some scoring, and you win a lot of games, hopefully 2-1, and you better pack them in defensively. Lucas Signoretti, yeah, he had all the points and all that, but you've got Mason Asinaway there and a few other guys who can play, and then you've got the goaltending. Schillinglaw, he is phenomenal to watch defensively. I love watching his game. Richard, I agree 100%. He's a fun kid to watch, and you know what? I think it comes down to Schillinglaw or King. Those are my 2 picks right now, and I think Schillinglaw, just because I follow Hearst and I want to see the Lumberjacks, and I want to see the Lumberjacks do well. But Owen King, if it wasn't for Owen King, where would the where would the Blind River Beavers be right now? That's my question. Yeah. So
I'll wrap it up with, for me, if you're looking at Schillinglaw and you're looking at King, if you take Schillinglaw first, they're not nearly as good, but that is such a deep team. If you take Owen King off Blind River, and Cole Jarrett made that comment when I interviewed him last week. He said, you take Owen King off Blind River, there's no chance they're finishing in 3rd place. It's just not happening. And when him and his coaches were pulling up the stats of different teams, and as soon as he saw King's stats in relation to the rest of the team, Cole said, there's your MVP. Like, to him, it was just like that. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, it's an argument can be made for all 3 guys. I mean, because also Signoretti was so far ahead of everyone when it came to points. I think he was a good 30 points ahead of King, if not 20. I'm not sure, but it was a significant gap. But anyway, guys, we're getting up there in terms of time here.
Yeah.
You guys,
one last thing, if I can.
Yep.
I swear this is quick. One of my favorite quotes, and it kills me, it's from a Yankee and Derek Jeter. But he said, there's 162 practices before you get to the real game. So right now we've gone through 52 practices. Now the real games are starting. So,
once you get to the playoffs, it's where the rubber meets the road and things get a lot grittier. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. You guys have been awesome all season long with your calls and also helping me as someone who's been involved in my first year in the league. So I really appreciate it. And listen, we're obviously going to do this again as we get on into the other rounds and stuff. This is just round 1, guys. And I appreciate everyone coming on and giving your input today. So guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. We had fun. Thanks guys.
Alex.
Thanks very much. It's been great.
enjoy the first round, and thank you everyone for watching. Just remember, through the playoffs, you can stay up to date by checking out the league's official social media outlets. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.